A weather-worn rancher, long exiled by guilt, finds his solitude shattered when a desperate woman and her 2 children arrive at his doorstep. Bound by unspoken wounds and uncertain trust, they forge a fragile bond beneath a roof built for one. In a land that forgets nothing, survival means more than shelter. It means facing what you buried, and some pasts won't stay buried. Sometimes, the family you choose is the one fate blows in with the storm. A man don't always set out to be alone. Sometimes it just happens that way. One piece at a time. A bad winter, a worse decision. The kind of silence that don't break, even when the wind howls through the pines like a woman grieving. They say the land remembers, but it lies. The land don't remember nothing. Not the blood spilled on it, nor the names whispered to the dirt when no one else was listening. You can bury the past all you like, but it don't stay down. Not out here. The sky was split with ice that morning. Fire burned low in the hearth, and a man watched the world through a frost-covered window, wondering if maybe the storm was finally coming for him too. He wouldn't have minded. Not anymore. But that storm carried something else, something unexpected. And once the door opened, well, nothing ever closed the same way again. The wind pressed hard against the logs, whining through the chinks like it wanted in. Smoke from the chimney curled low to the ground before the cold took it. A buckskin curtain of snow hung over the mountain ridge, unmoving, thick as old grief. Inside the cabin, he moved slow and quiet, each motion carved from habit, not need. He wasn't in no hurry, hadn't been for years. He poured hot water over coffee grounds, let it sit. The mug was chipped, same one his boy used to drink from. Back when mornings meant something more than surviving. The chair across the table sat empty. Always did. Dust lived in the corners. The Bible stayed closed. He fed the fire, not with care, just enough to keep the frost from biting deeper than it already had. A scar near his collarbone tugged every time he lifted wood, white and angry against his weathered skin. It ran down like a reminder. No one ever asked about it anymore. No one left to ask. A pair of boots sat by the door, small, untouched, for years. He stepped outside into the blinding white. Snow crunched under his weight. He checked the goats. One was limping again. He didn't name them, just animals, not companions. He fixed the fence line with stiff fingers, tying wire with the same knot he'd used 100 times before. A raven watched from the tree line. Behind the cabin, half hidden by pine, 2 markers leaned toward each other like old lovers. No names carved, just rocks, and a wooden cross he never bothered to fix when the wind snapped it sideways 2 winters back. He didn't kneel, just stood there a while, breath fogging in the still air, hat clutched in calloused hands. Back inside, he stared at the shelf above the stove. A single envelope rested there, yellowed, edges curled, still sealed. He didn't open it, never did. As night fell, the wind picked up again, raking the walls. He sat by the fire with his rifle across his knees, not for protection, not really, just habit, like everything else. The wind changed. It wasn't just colder, it was mean. Came down off the ridge like it was looking to gut the world clean open. Snow slapped sideways against the window panes, fast and sharp as birdshot. Sky gone white. Trees bent in silence. He'd seen storms like this before, twice, maybe 3 times. The kind that buried wagons and froze men upright. 1 minute you're split in wood, next you're a statue for the crows come spring. He'd already banked the fire, latched every shutter, pushed his coat against the doorframe. By nightfall, it howled. He poured the last of the coffee, sat near the stove, rifle across his thighs, eyes fixed on nothing. Just the sound of wind and the groan of old wood trying not to give up. It was a hard kind of quiet, the kind that made you wonder if maybe this was the one you wouldn't wake from. Then, a thud. Not the wind. Too solid. He stood, listened. Another. Not a knock. A body. He unbarred the door slow, pushing it just wide enough to let the cold sink its teeth in. For a second, all he saw was white, blizzard, thick as smoke. Then the shape moved, stumbled forward. A woman. bareheaded, her hair thick with frost, cradling something to her chest. Another shape behind her. Small. No, two. One dragging the other by the hand. She opened her mouth like she meant to speak, but nothing came out. Just a rasp, and then she dropped to her knees in the drift. He didn't speak, didn't ask. Just stepped forward, grabbed the nearest child, thin as a rail, cheeks red raw, and hauled her inside. The boy followed on shaking legs. Last came the woman, limp in his arms, lighter than she looked. Too light. He shut the door, bolted it again. The wind screamed in protest. Steam rose as snow melted off their clothes onto the floorboards. The girl clung to her brother. Neither spoke. He laid the woman near the fire. She stirred once, coughed, whispered something he didn't catch. He knelt beside her, face unreadable. "Goddamn fool storm," he muttered, then added, quieter, "What in hell did you walk into?" He didn't want them here, but he didn't open the door for nothing either. The cabin held the heat close, though it never quite made it past the center. The fire hissed low, chewing on logs that snapped and wept sap. Snow ticked against the roof like time passing, soft but steady. Outside, the storm roared like it meant to swallow the world. Inside, the silence was louder. He moved without rush, used to the rhythm of tending things alone. But now there were people here. Small ones, broken ones. He set a pot to warm, stirred in beans and dried meat. Simple food. All he had. It'd have to be enough. The boy sat closest to the fire, knees drawn up, hands buried in the folds of an oversized coat. The girl, older, kept her eyes on the stranger, the man who'd carried their mother in like she weighed less than the cold itself. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared. He brought them tin bowls. They didn't say, "Thank you." He didn't expect it. The woman lay wrapped in a wool blanket. Color had come back to her lips, but her face stayed hollow. Her hair, dark and tangled, clung to her cheeks. She stirred once when he tucked a second blanket over her. Eyes fluttered open, just for a moment, met his, then closed again. He sat in the old rocking chair and ate his own share in silence. The boy slurped his stew greedily. The girl didn't eat until her brother finished. Even then, she only picked at it. Her fingers were raw, the nails dark with dried blood and dirt. He watched the flames twist. "You got names?" he asked finally, not looking at them. The boy looked to the girl. She hesitated, then spoke, soft, clear. "Clara, he's Tommy." He nodded once. "She your ma?" he asked, nodding toward the woman. Clara nodded. "She got a name. Liza, that was all." He set his bowl down, wiped his hands on his trousers. The clock ticked. Wind shook the shutters again. "What were you doing out in that storm?" Neither answered. He didn't ask again. Later, he moved the kids to a cot. They clung to each other like they'd always slept that way, shoulder to back, hand to arm, one blanket between them. He took the chair again, boots off, rifle leaned against the wall. The fire sank lower, shadows lengthened. Eliza murmured in her sleep, a name, one he didn't know, then another, a man's maybe, or a place. Clara turned in her sleep and for a moment looked toward him, like she was waiting on something, a question, a promise. He didn't speak. The storm hadn't passed yet, not by a damn sight. But he'd opened his door. That meant something, even if it shouldn't. The days came slower now. The storm moved on, left behind deep drifts and bent trees, but the cold held steady, like it had no intention of leaving. Inside, the cabin shifted from a place of waiting to a place of living. But only just. Every sound felt louder. A spoon on tin, a cough in the night, footsteps in rooms once too quiet for echo. He chopped wood most mornings, never looked at the house while he did, just swung the axe, steady and mean. Clara watched him sometimes from the window, eyes big and still. Tommy followed him out once, boots too big, mittens trailing from string. Didn't say a word, just stood nearby with his arms folded tight. The woman, Eliza, moved carefully, like someone used to walking on ground that might give way. She cooked when he let her, washed what little there was to wash, said thank you too often, didn't speak of the road behind them. He didn't ask. They sat at the table each night, 4 seats now, though there'd only been one for a long time. He ate slow, hands rough around the fork. Tommy talked in bursts, about a squirrel he saw, about how the fire made shadows on the ceiling. Clara stayed quiet, always watching, like she was waiting for someone to disappear. Eliza listened. Always listened. That was the thing, like she was measuring the weight of the air before she breathed it. One evening, he told a story, not on purpose, just sort of happened. Something about a mule he once had that wouldn't stop kicking fences. Clara laughed. Not loud, just a breath with a shape in it. Tommy didn't get the joke but smiled anyway. Eliza looked at him like she'd never seen him before. He didn't smile. After, he went out to the graves again, snow up to his knees now. He didn't bring flowers, just stood there, hat in hand. "It ain't what you think," he muttered. "I didn't invite 'em." Back inside, the fire had dimmed. Clara had drawn something on a scrap of paper, folded it, then handed it to him like it was a secret. It was a picture. 4 stick figures, a cabin, smoke from the chimney, a sun in the corner, even though it had been days since they saw one. "That you?" he asked, pointing to the small figure with a big hat. She nodded. He set it on the mantel, right next to the yellowed envelope. Tommy looked up from his blanket, eyes half closed. "Good night, mister." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice sounded like it came from somewhere else. "Yeah, night." Then he sat in the rocker again, watched the fire, and the ghosts watched him. Only now, they had smaller hands and softer voices. The storm gave way slow, like it hated to loosen its grip. First came the wind's retreat, still mean but without bite. Then the sun showed its face, low and shy through the clouds. The trees, stripped bare, stood like bones against a white sky. The cabin, half buried in snowdrift, groaned with the thaw. Inside, things moved quieter than before. The kind of quiet that meant change was creeping in. Eliza stood by the window that morning, arms folded. Her hair was combed now, pulled back with a strip of cloth. Her shoulders didn't sag like they used to, but there was a tightness to her, like something held in place by sheer will. "I reckon we ought to move on," she said, not turning. He didn't answer right off, just kept cleaning his rifle, slow and steady. Click of the rag, metal on metal. "Soon as the pass clears," she added. Tommy was stacking kindling. Clara sat on the floor with her drawing paper, tongue between her teeth. He set the rifle aside. "Ain't nothing past that pass but more winter." She looked over her shoulder. "Ain't nothing behind it, neither." Their eyes met, neither one flinching. That night, after the kids were down and the cabin sat hushed with firelight, he stood in the doorway to their room. Didn't knock. Didn't cross the threshold. "They'll do better in town," she said, not facing him. "Maybe," he said. "Might do worse." She turned then. "You don't know what we're running from." "No, and I ain't asked." Silence stretched like old leather between them. He took a breath, scratched at his jaw. "I got food enough, land enough. If you need to keep hid, this place does it. Well," her hands trembled where they clutched the blanket. "You don't even know us." "I know cold, hunger, loss." He shifted his weight. "Ain't asking for nothing. Just saying. If you want to stay, the door don't lock from my side." She said nothing, just looked at him for a long while. The fire cracked once, then went quiet. He turned and left her there, back in the hush of half-decisions and long shadows. Outside, snow began to fall again, not heavy, just enough to soften the ground, and in the dark the door stayed closed, but not latched. The snow melted slow, then all at once. Spring came like it was ashamed, muddy, reluctant, heavy with thaw and memory. When the road cleared and the creek ran deep again, he hitched the mule and loaded the wagon. Eliza packed light, like someone still expecting to leave. Clara folded her drawings in a tin box. Tommy asked if there'd be candy. The trail to town hadn't changed. Trees still leaned in like old men whispering. Birds returned to their branches. The air held a wetness to it, clean and restless. But his hands on the reins were tight. He hadn't ridden into town in near 2 years, not since before. As they rolled into Main Street, boots hit the boardwalks. Eyes followed. Children pointed. Women leaned together in their bonnets, whispering behind gloved hands. Men didn't whisper. They just stared, stiff and unmoved, thumbs resting near belt buckles and pistol grips. Not hostile, not yet, but not friendly neither. A sign creaked in the wind above the Mercantile. Dust lifted off the street in low swirls. Somewhere, a bell rang soft from the church. "Don't stare," Eliza murmured to Clara, who was already gripping the edge of the wagon bench. "I want a peppermint," Tommy said, too loud. No one smiled. At the livery, he handed off the mule. The stable boy blinked at him like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Next stop was the general store. He pushed the door open with his shoulder. The bell jingled, bright and lonely. Behind the counter stood his brother, Samuel. It had been near 4 years. "Didn't think I'd see you again," Samuel said. He didn't move. "Didn't figure I'd come back," the man replied, laying a small list on the wood. Samuel looked past him, saw Eliza through the window, the children. "She yours?" He didn't answer. Samuel huffed. "Preacher's been asking about you. So's the marshal." "I ain't here to be asked after." Samuel leaned forward, voice low. "She don't look like your wife. Kids don't look like you." The man looked him in the eye. "You see a ring on her hand?" "No." "Then don't pretend it's your concern." They left the store with sacks in hand, eyes still trailing them like vultures waiting on a limp. At the schoolhouse, Clara paused, watched the children chase each other around the yard. A little girl waved at her. Clara didn't wave back. At the church steps, Eliza stopped, stared up at the bell tower. "I know this town," she whispered. "Good or bad?" he asked. She didn't answer. Back on the wagon, Tommy chewed a peppermint stick. Clara held a primer book in her lap, not reading it. "You want to stay?" he asked Eliza just above the wind. She shook her head. "I want them to have a chance." "That ain't what I asked." She looked at him then, eyes tired but lit with something else. "You think this place forgives, just 'cause you kept breathing?" "No," he said, "but I reckon we don't owe it our death either." They rode out slow, the dust rising behind them, and the town watched them go, like maybe it hoped they wouldn't come back, or feared they would. The night came in clean and hard. No wind, no storm, just stillness, the kind that pressed against the skin and made every sound louder. The fire crackled steady in the hearth, the light pushing back against the edges of the one-room cabin. Shadows danced on the log walls. The children were asleep, bundled together like pups in a den. He sat by Tan, he window, oil lamp low, sharpening a blade that no longer saw much use. The rhythm steadied him, draw the stone, turn, draw again. But his eyes weren't on the knife, they were on the dark. Behind him, Eliza moved quiet, folding the day's clothes. Her hands knew work, but her body showed the years hadn't been kind. She stood straighter now than when she arrived, but there was still something in the way she moved, always half ready to run. She set the folded shirt down and looked toward him. "You don't sleep much," she said. He stopped the blade, wiped it once with a rag. "Not since 'fore the war." Silence again, the kind that wasn't empty. She stepped nearer to the fire, crossed her arms. "This ain't the kind of life I meant to end up in," she said, eyes on the flames. "No man, no name, no roof of our own. Just moving, always moving." "You ain't moving now," he said. "I don't mean just boots on the ground." She didn't say more. He stood, slow, walked over to the table, the chair creaking under his weight as he sat. He reached into the small chest beneath the shelf and set something wrapped in cloth on the wood. Inside, a deed, a key, a silver ring, dull and plain. "I ain't good at talking," he said, eyes on the wood grain. "Ain't never been." Eliza watched, unmoving. "I got this land, this house, ain't much, but it holds." She didn't interrupt. "I ain't asking for what most men ask for. Ain't love I'm speaking on. Not now, maybe not ever. But if you want steadiness, if you want shelter, you can have my name. You and the kids. Make this place yours too." He looked up, finally met her eyes. "I ain't expectin' nothing back." She walked over quiet, took the cloth, held it, sat across from him. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. She just breathed like a weight inside her had been loosened but not yet lifted. "Most men ask for more with far less," she said. "I ain't most men. No, you ain't." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just stayed, and that was enough for the night. The years didn't come loud. They came quiet. Key the way a creek cuts through stone. Slow, steady, never asking permission. By the second spring, Clara rode better than most boys her age. Sat a horse like she was born to it, boots firm in the stirrups, reins light in her hands. She laughed when she rode, not out of joy but from something freer, something earned. Tommy was always at work. Mended fences without being told. Learned to read the sky, the soil, the animals. He'd hum when he hammered nails, a tune from no song anyone knew. The kind passed from heart to hand without words. The man, folks called him Jacob again, though not many did so to his face, woke each day before the sun, walked the line of the property, saw what had changed, what hadn't. He spoke less, but what he said carried weight. Eliza matched his silence with her own. Together they ran the place, not lovers, not strangers, but something else, something hard to name and harder to shake. They shared meals every evening, candle on the table, smoke curling upward. A grace was said, though no one looked heavenward much. Eliza sewed curtains for the windows. Let Tommy help when his fingers weren't too clumsy. Clara carved shapes into the porch posts, horses, birds, a tree that didn't match anything near. Come harvest, neighbors came out of the woods and hills to help lift what grew. Some still whispered, some didn't. No one asked again if Eliza wore Jacob's ring. They saw how the children worked the fields beside him, how Eliza led prayer with quiet strength, how Jacob, when the ox bucked and Tommy fell, was the first to kneel, his arms firm, voice low and steady, like a father should sound. A photograph was taken by a traveling man with a camera. Eliza wore her best shawl. Clara squinted into the sun. Tommy refused to stand still. Jacob held his hat in hand, his eyes soft and tired. They hung that photo on the wall above the hearth, right beside the old drawing Clara had made, edges curled now with time. One morning, Jacob carved a name into the lintel beam above the front door. It wasn't his. It wasn't hers. It was all of theirs, and though no one spoke of it, there was a day he left something by the graves on the hill, a letter, unopened, and a flower, new bloomed from Eliza's garden. He knelt there longer than usual. When he stood, the wind carried the scent of sage and smoke. He looked back down toward the cabin, saw Eliza by the porch, her hand resting on the rail, waiting. He nodded once. She nodded back. And life, like a river, kept on flowing, quiet, unrelenting, and full. The wind came down from the ridge like it always did, low and steady, curling around the cabin like it remembered the shape of it. Snowflakes danced in the air, soft and slow, not in fury now, but like ash drifting from a long, cooled fire. The porch creaked under Jacob's boots. He stood with one hand resting on the post Clara carved all those years ago. A bird now weathered near smooth by sun and seasons. Behind him, voices stirred inside, Eliza humming low in the kitchen, Tommy stacking wood, Clara reading aloud from a worn book. The land stretched before him, wide and familiar. Fence lines, the barn, the field now bare, sleeping, This place held things now. Memories, footsteps, names. His breath showed in the air, and he watched it fade. From inside the cabin, laughter flickered through the wood, light, not loud. The kind born from folks who'd carried sorrow and laid it down piece by piece. He looked to the hill. The graves up there were snow-capped, still as ever, but the ache they once carried had softened, not vanished, just settled. He spoke quiet, mostly to himself, or maybe to the wind. She asked if they could hide here. He ran his hand along the porch rail, fingers brushing frost. Truth is, I was the one hiding, thought I could bury it all beneath snow and silence, thought the world'd forget me if I just kept still long enough. He looked down the path that led to the gate, then to the sky. But fate don't knock. It blows in, cold and sudden. And sometimes it brings you what you didn't know you needed. He stepped back toward the door, boots leaving prints in the dusting of snow. Inside, Tommy called out for help with the firewood. Eliza scolded him gently, voice warm. Clara laughed. Jacob paused in the threshold, one last glance at the land, at the quiet. Then he said it, just above a whisper. They didn't need rescuing. A faint smile touched his face, and it wasn't sad. They rescued me. He shut the door behind him. The wind moved on, carrying no weight now, just weather. And the snow kept falling, soft as sleep.